Hello, welcome to Tub Talks with Damon. My special guest today is Dana Diamond, here to talk about life and love and resilience and so much. Thank you so much for being in the tub today.
Thank you for having me in the tub. It's so exciting.
It's not too weird, is it? It feels a little weird.
You know what? It was less weird getting in the tub than it was thinking about getting in the tub. That's for sure.
So that's a great lesson, right? Thinking about it sort of made it weird, but just doing it was just doing it.
I'm in the tub with a friend, and I haven't been in the tub in a while, so it's quite nice.
All right. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do a series like this, was to spotlight the efforts and accomplishments of so many people in New York City who are doing such amazing work to change the world, to help others, and show me ways to live my life that's more fulfilling and joyful. And you are one of these people I look to, like, what's Dana doing today? What is she talking about today? It's amazing. And this is like, I want to spotlight this and talk about this. But first thing I'm asking all my guests is, what do you like most about your body?
One thing, and I know it might sound a little cliche, but my eyes, because I really feel, and I've been told, my eyes really tell everything about what's going on with me. And so sometimes that could be a good thing, sometimes not a great thing. My eyes. And I always liked my butt. I did. I had a pretty nice butt.
You did? You still do?
Well, thank you.
You mean you don't like it now? Or?
Yeah, it's still okay. It's still okay. We're hanging in there.
Okay. Well, these discussions I enjoy having, because I think our bodies are beautiful, resilient vehicles, and we really only have them a short period of time. But what I know we tend to do is, especially gay men and women, and especially as we get older, we're conditioned to think of all the flaws, the things we don't like, the things that are different. And I'm just trying to say, what if we just celebrate what we got and show it and love it and say, like, you know, we're only going to have these vehicles temporarily.
Absolutely. I have always tried to encourage folks to, embrace the changes that happen with aging, the changes that happen with HIV, the changes that happen with chronic illness of many types, chronic pain and bone issues and all the rest.
Yes.
But sometimes it's a little more difficult. And I know it has to come from me first, and I work on it. I'm a work in progress. Everybody's got work to do, and I believe my work is still to be done because I'm still here. But I do know that one thing about embracing my body is less about trying to get out of the look and actually take a journey. This body probably should have been dead about 12 times. It's more than 9 lives with a cat. And so my body has gotten me through a lot of times. And it really has, as much as we tend to focus on the times that it doesn't do me so well, I need to remember the times that it really stood up for me.
Yeah, that it is. And this is, again, what you stand for, what you speak of, because your eyes are so sincere. You're helping me and so many people learn these things. So let's talk about some of these things.
Cool.
We have discussed, and you have shared around the world, your experience of living with HIV as a long-term survivor.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that? When you were diagnosed?
I'm sliding. I'm going to end up under the water, just so you all know.
Anything you want to make it comfortable?
We're good.
We're good?
We're good.
Okay.
I don't want to sink.
You can push on me too.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, helpful.
Yeah.
So my journey with HIV started in 1993, and I was an injection drug user, and heroin was my drug of choice. And one night I was very, very sick and withdrawal from heroin withdrawal, and kind of went looking for anyone, friends, whomever. At the time, I also was doing sex work. Obviously, I had that career path, which brought me money, sex for money and drugs, etc. So I was looking actually for my running buddy who lived in the neighborhood, and I stumbled upon him. And I remember clear as day, this many years. I may not remember what I had last week for lunch, but this I remember clear as day. He said, he pulled out of his pocket, he said, I don't have a bag of heroin, but I have what's left in my syringe, which meant he had used his syringe already. Now, '93, it was a horrific time for HIV, for folks living with HIV, dying. But when you're in the grips of addiction in that severe state that I was in, you don't relate what's happening in the world to you, so to speak, because of the fact that it's a very self-centered disease, addiction. It really is. You're very focused on self, and you don't really think of how these actions are related to you. And nor do you, if you do realize, sometimes you don't really care because of what you're feeling at that moment. So I was so sick in withdrawal that I took the syringe. Now, he didn't say I'm HIV positive. Here's a syringe with, that I just used. But he said, I just used it. That's all he said. And towards the end of the year, I got very sick. This was in the summertime. And towards the end of that year, in '93, I was very ill. I had 104 fever. I was brought to the hospital because I was just on the corner in the Bronx with my duffel bag that I used to carry around because those were my belongings. I would live from couch to couch. And my children were with my mother. And so I would, I was out and about. And I remember calling the ambulance and telling them where I was, and they're like, what building? No, I'm on the corner. It took a while for them to realize that I was just standing on the corner. I said, I have a big bag, big blue duffel bag. Just come get me. And they came, and they took my temperature and all that. It was 104. They rushed me to the emergency room. And I remember them saying, we think you're HIV positive. They said, we really want you to take a test. So then we had a consent in writing. I just know I consented in writing. And they treated me for what was endocarditis. So I had a very bad infection in my heart. All the junk that was, it mixed in with the heroin that they used to cut it up, clogged an artery in my heart, a major artery. So you get a massive infection. And they gave me this whole speech, told me, you could die from this, which obviously I didn't. I was in the hospital about 2 months. I had 3 antibiotics running through my veins, and they used to leave the antibiotics there because I would switch my little line. Of course, it was in my vein already. I was just switching the bags because I was a good patient. I was what they call a good patient. I didn't give anyone any trouble. I took care of the older woman next to me. I would comb her hair because besides the 3 antibiotics that were coursing through my veins, someone was bringing me heroin that I would inject directly in my IV. Now, if that isn't the madness of addiction, I don't know what is. So they just saw that I was a good patient. They didn't ask questions, anything like that. So eventually, when it was time to leave, they said, you better stop doing what you're doing or you're going to die. This is what I call the first of the finger wags, but no one showed me how to stop doing what I was doing. No referrals, no nothing.
So they were just saying, don't do this, don't do this. I'm going to put up the duckies.
Exactly.
But they weren't actually giving you sensible, compassionate.
Right. And so I left the hospital, and of course they didn't tell me how to stop doing what I was doing, so I kept doing what I was doing.
Heroin.
Not 6 weeks later, yes, I kept injecting heroin, and 6 weeks later I was back with another bout of endocarditis. And now they're like, you won't live through it again. You just lived through it 2 times. Again, the finger wag. But when I got back to the hospital that time, of course I never went for my results. So when I got back to the hospital with that bout of endocarditis the second time, they gave me my results, and it was like, you're HIV positive, okay? Okay. And they left the room. They just left me there. And I was like, what? And I remember I started to cry, and other women, which apparently I was already on the so-called AIDS floor, because other women started to come to my room with their IV poles. Everyone was running around on IV poles. I used to roll down the hallway of the hospital on my IV pole. Mm-hmm. And they sat on my bed and told me it's going to be okay. That's not how they should have told you. et cetera, et cetera. And I said, that was my first sense of community. And while it was quite a few years later, a couple of years later till I got into treatment, that was the first sense of community I had with other women who were also HIV positive. And eventually the law caught up to me for, buying heroin. And since the hospital thing didn't work, I guess maybe jail would. And I spent 6 months in Rikers Island, and then I had an offer from a judge who was, I want to say, compassionate. And while I was mandated to treatment, which he did, because he said, I don't feel like going to prison is going to help you. You didn't have a problem before drugs. You're not somebody who's going to break the law before drugs, and I don't believe after drugs you would. And he said, he was telling everybody, this is a case of somebody needing help for addiction, and sending out of prison does not help addiction.
That was a judge.
That was a judge.
Wow.
He was used to working with youth, but I was in my early 30s at that point.
Wow.
But I really, to this day, thank him so much.
Wow.
Because he really did a wonderful job. And so while I don't think mandation is how it has to go all the time, because of the work that I do now at Exponents, we do things a little differently, but I think that for me, and that's why it's great to have other options, finally someone showed me how I could do something differently instead of the finger wag. And I went through treatment and detox from methadone, and probably the worst thing I ever had to do in my life, and I think that I keep that very upfront. It was worse than childbirth. And
the withdrawal from methadone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the worst thing. I mean, I'd rather give birth again.
Was it a rapid detox, or did they titrate you?
No, it wasn't rapid, but painful nonetheless. I don't think there's an easy way really of doing it. I think there are easier ways now, but yeah, I keep that pain up front. I don't know that I have the strength to do that today, so.
So in 1993, this was before there were treatments available. What, you kind of already said, what did that feel like to hear that news that you were living with HIV?
So there was a hospitalization after that AZT was available.
Wow.
And I remember them giving me this pill.
Yeah.
And they said, this is what we got. You have to take it every day. So I started taking it. And I went from a pretty vivacious person to somebody who started to not be able to get out of the hospital bed. I was very lethargic. I kind of looked swollen all over my body, and I wouldn't eat. If I don't eat, trust me, call 911 because there's a problem. And even the nurses were doing what they should not do, is bring back their food for me, trying to get me to eat. And I just remember a moment, and for me, this is what I think dying would feel like. I remember feeling a separation from my body, and I was looking at myself in the hospital bed. I was like over my body, and I felt like my physical body couldn't really move, but I was moving above my body. It was just a weird thing. And all I know is when the nurse came in with that pill again, I was like, I'm not taking it. Just no, the doctor said you had to take it. I said, tell the doctor he can take it. And I threw it in the garbage. And I came back to life. So for me, that wasn't the treatment. And I struggled with treatments over the years, but it was the start. So I'm always grateful for it because it helped a lot of folks. And it was also the start of medications as we know them today.
Yeah, but AZT was very difficult, and for some, quite toxic.
And because nobody knew the dosing appropriately at first, so it was way too toxic.
So when the antiretrovirals started getting used in 1996, did you feel like you wanted to take them? Were you reluctant to use them because of that history?
I was in treatment and getting ready to come out of treatment. So when I went in treatment, they put me on a regimen. What I realized is I couldn't take protease inhibitors. They weren't They didn't like me, I didn't like them. But
Meaning
I
like
did.
the side effects were.
Yeah. And so from 1998 to 2008, I went off medications altogether.
Okay.
And what I knew now, what I knew then working in the field, I knew the time to take medications was not once I got sick.
Yeah.
So I knew enough to say, I need to take them before I get sick. But there wasn't anything else. So by that time there was a one pill once a day, and I'm like, okay, I'm on it. You know, I was allergic to parts of that, and so it was a struggle. But since then, anyway, since 2008, I have taken my medication religiously, every day as prescribed, even if it meant changing. And I've been undetectable since then as well.
Wow. How are you comfortable?
Yeah, I am. I just keep sliding.
That's okay. And you can like push.
Okay.
If you like.
I'm gonna get you
There's
that
share
up
down.
enough.
Yeah.
I'm so uninhibited that I don't want to flash your.
It's all right. It's all right. So when did you find out what it meant to be undetectable? When did the U equals U message become clear?
So it was interesting. Not officially, but working in the field of HIV, we knew for a long time that undetectable equals untransmittable. But of course, until it was studied, and you can't quite say that that is true. But we knew just based on, different people's stories of it. I had been in a 10-year relationship with someone who was not HIV positive, and we always used condoms because I felt more comfortable. At that time, I just felt more comfortable. And it wasn't studied, it wasn't science yet, and I was a little worried. I did not ever want to, have him become HIV positive. But
So
also,
you were really, really cautious about that. You were wanting to make sure that there was no transmission.
And before we even had sex, this was a conversation that we had for a long period of time as we were friends first. And so we had a lot of conversations once we kind of thought we wanted to get together, and it was a long conversation over time, talking about it, how would it work, what would happen. So this way, in the middle of that moment, you don't have to have that conversation. You can feel free, which is how you're going to have the best sexual relationship, when you feel free and uninhibited. So we had all that talk outside of, before it ever happened. And he was someone I had the best sex of my life. And that's why I thought at 50, it was just a great time in my life, Unfortunately, he ended up getting cancer. And after 10 years with him, he finally asked me to marry him. And he died 3 months later. So it was quite devastating for me. I knew I wanted to be with him the rest of my life. He and I talked about relationships. Neither of us wanted to get married again. But I knew in the back of my head that this is the person I'm going to be with for the rest of my life. And I did want to marry him. And so when he asked me, it was funny. It was almost around the time that he started to get sick, but no one knew what it was. He was diabetic. And he was also 9 years older than I was. And he ended up with kidney cancer. And being that he was hepatitis C positive, although he wasn't HIV positive, I since then have been treated and cured of hep C. He was from the group of substance users and IV drug users who didn't contract HIV, because as we know, there's much more hep C in a drop of blood than there is HIV. So it was easier to contract hepatitis C, and he did. And he couldn't treat the hep C because of his kidney. He couldn't treat the cancer in his kidney because of his hep C. And so it was just like a very, he had moved in with me, and 3 months later, he died. And that was 9 years ago. And I don't quite think I'm even over it or will ever be over it. But if I can get through this conversation without crying, I know I've made some steps towards, my grieving process. But it's been a rough road, and it continues to be a little bit.
Yeah. And I still thank you so much for that. I mean, for me, tears are, they're often sad, but they're often love. And, we cry, I think. We cry because we love, and that's one of the ways we're still connected, even when people
and we have to continue to come out, because that's how you're going to go through these times. It's very cleansing, and, it's important to feel what you feel.
Now, so he passed before the U equals U message became more public, before the activist movement started. And so was there ever a time in the relationship that you both felt safe enough to enjoy sex without latex?
No, not really. But I don't think it became such an issue because, like I said, I was having the best sex of my life. And so was he. And we were having the best sex of our lives with condoms and dental dams and all the things. And I don't know if that added to some of the playfulness of it, because we're always making it interesting and fun, that added to that experience. But I just never felt like, oh, gee, it would be so much better without. That, for me, that's my experience.
It's beautiful.
But I love that people can make their own decisions now and not feel badly or feel guilty. It's so awful, especially when you're trying to share an intimate, passionate moment. It's horrible to get caught up in your head. And I think for me, I never wanted to start my head thinking, that has no place where we are. And we were on this other level somewhere, I don't know, out of the universe. And so nothing got in the way of that.
Wow. Beautiful. That moves me. So we have also, you and I have talked at conferences, and we have done some seminars about harm reduction and smoking.
Yes.
Because one of the things that has concerned me in this movement, like as we talk about U equals U, and we talk about PrEP, and we talk all about the ways for people to have a quality and quantity of life that they wish to have, and the quality of connection they wish to have, is when I started to realize, learn from the data and just from my own personal experiences, there was so much smoking in the community. And every time I went to one of these conferences about HIV and AIDS, it was like everybody was outside, like on the breaks, smoking.
Right.
And for me, there's no morality in that. I have it's not a morality issue. But then I started to learn what the data was telling us, that people now who are living with HIV are more likely to die from lung cancer than from HIV if they smoke. And that there were all these alternatives available that in this country were not being utilized, including vaping alternatives. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So I, smoked, I don't know what it was, like 42 years of my life or something. Yeah, that's a long time. I started smoking when I was 15. And back then it was more like my mother didn't want me burning down the house, so she's like, here. She gave me an ashtray and said, just be careful. Don't light anything on fire. She was so scared, hiding it and whatever. Now we have different conversations, but I remember getting to the point where I didn't enjoy smoking that much. And I was raising the window so I could try to blow the smoke out of my 18-story window. But of course, there's like a screen there. And it just all blew back in. I hated the way it smelled. And I wasn't smoking that much by that time. Ever since I detoxed from methadone, it was the kind of thing that it wasn't as pleasurable. But I still wanted to smoke. I hated the smell. I didn't like how it tasted. But I kept smoking. So I know about a year or two before that, I tried like a little e-cigarette and it did nothing, but I don't think my head was wrapped around it either. So finally, I guess it's been 5-6 years that I haven't smoked a cigarette.
Wow.
From the time I picked up vaping, I have never smoked another cigarette.
Wow.
Not one. And so for me, I had my head wrapped around, you do this work, girl, you need to stop smoking, but let's see what we can do. So I wrapped my head around stopping, which I wanted to do. I had never tried to quit before. It was the first and only time.
Wow.
I knew that I wouldn't be successful if I did. Like, it was one of those things, if I'm going to do it, I better be successful. That's how my head worked. But I went and bought a little stick, like an e-cigarette, with disposable pods, and from that day on, I never smoked another cigarette. Now, what's interesting is that I get mixed messages, especially from the medical community, which makes me not want to even tell people I vape.
Yeah.
And
what are the mixed messages?
because I feel like I'm being shamed. And my position at Exponents, the community-based organization I work at, the Director of Health Services, I coordinate, I supervise clinically the counselors in the harm reduction program. And I know that I was at a meeting one time and I was so proud shortly after I stopped smoking cigarettes to say, I stopped smoking. I did it because this is how I did it. And I haven't smoked another cigarette yet. And it wasn't even a year yet. And all I heard from a physician was, well, you got to stop that too. And I remember I was so proud that after 42 years, I stopped smoking. And I said, I will make sure that nobody ever makes anyone feel ashamed for making incremental changes in their life, no matter what they are. Wow. And even though that's how at Exponents we work with participants, just even the fact of saying someone's a participant as opposed to a client, which puts the driver's seat, the person is in their driver's seat. They are choosing their path. We're not telling them what to do. We could be a guide, we can offer many different suggestions, but ultimately it's their choice. Right. Choose what they want to do, why they're here, what they come to do. So that's where my head was, and I was excited about all the work that we do. But if we're doing that work and then others in the community, and whether it be other community-based organizations, or it's not just physicians, and it's not all of them, that is for sure. But if people in the field are giving these messages, it kind of sets us back so many years.
So when medical professionals shame us for making incremental steps towards health and wellness, it is so derailing and dehumanizing. Yes. And maybe someone could explain this to me. Maybe we could have a discussion. I don't understand in America why this is the barrier when it comes to nicotine and safer nicotine alternatives. Vaping is a safer nicotine alternative.
Yes.
It is estimated to be, because there's no carcinogen, or no, 95% less carcinogens.
Right.
But there's no tar, there's no tobacco. So it is a much safer alternative than smoking a cigarette. Now, the same doctors, in my experience, who would condemn someone for this, condemn you for this, would be the same to recommend methadone as an alternative for heroin. They would recommend safe syringe exchange to prevent HIV and Hep C. They would recommend someone use sunscreen if they're going to spend a day out on the beach. They'd recommend vaccines to protect from COVID. And these are all harm reduction frameworks. They don't eliminate harm. They don't eliminate risk. Right. They significantly reduce risk, but they don't eliminate. And vaping is exactly in that category. What is the barrier, do you think?
I know for me, and I had this conversation with them, and I said, for me, I was someone who would have, even as little as I was smoking, at the time that I quit, I had bronchitis at least once a year, or upper respiratory infections. I've not had one in 6 years.
So since you switched from cigarettes to vaping, no respiratory infections.
It doesn't mean that people who don't smoke cigarettes or vape at all get, upper respiratory infections or bronchitis. I'm not saying I never will, but it's not a coincidence that I would get one at least every 9 months, something respiratory. And I have not had one thing in the last 5 years, except a sinus infection that was,
Right, but that was the experience, that was the difference that you had when you quit smoking cigarettes and switched to vaping. Now, someone watching this might say, well, Dana, why can't you just stop vaping? Why can't you just stop using nicotine at all? And you would say,
I don't want to.
Yes!
I don't want to. Everything else I have stopped in my life.
Yes.
I don't find that it is harming me.
Yes.
I'm not doing something that I know consciously is hurting me, and I would look into maybe I could change some of that or do something, another alternative. But I want to.
Yes.
Plain and simple, I want to.
Yeah.
That's
beautiful.
What I got.
And for a lot of people, it's like caffeine. I mean, nicotine and caffeine metabolically are very similar.
I drink coffee too, but
very
little now.
But the same people who judge nicotine
Right.
are the same people who generally drink caffeine every day. And you try to take away their coffee from them, there's going to be hell to pay. But they don't understand that like nicotine and caffeine are very similar drugs.
Yes.
They work in the brain in a very similar way. You have a right to use caffeine in relatively. Now, caffeine can still lead to heart attacks and strokes and hypertension and all that stuff, but if it's consumed safely, it's considered to be a very minimal kind of risk. Nicotine, when it's consumed safely, is also a drug that is considered to be minimal risk.
Right.
This is why nicotine patches and gums are so commonly used as well, because nicotine by itself is not considered to be a harmful drug. It is the delivery system in cigarettes that makes it so toxic and deadly.
That's it.
Sorry, that was my rant, but I just, I had to talk about that because it's. I feel so that the judgment that you get, that you've gotten, that you're still getting, is unfair. I feel like these questions that people make exceptions for nicotine, but not for caffeine, or I mean, we use harm reduction every day, especially in a COVID world. We're all using harm reduction every single day. So I would say, less shaming, more helping, and just like respecting each other. Oh my gosh.
Shaming just makes people feel so badly.
Right. And it doesn't stop them from doing what they're doing. It just makes them go do it in the corner or, where you can't find them.
Right.
Or at the conferences, makes people like go further and further away from the hotel because they're ashamed.
It made me not want to even talk about when they say, do you smoke cigarettes? No. And that's all I say.
Yeah. Because there's no.
Normally I'd be, no, but I vape. But like with a doctor, I'm very open about everything that I do with doctors. But I found that one thing, and that's why. So if I'm having difficulty, it's because I've had these experiences that were more negative.
Wow.
And then what if I do need help with something? What if, I always feel I want to be 100% clear with my doctors and tell them everything that's going on with me.
Yeah. I love that. So this now also reminds me of how, again, your light, your transparency, your energy is so helpful for the people around you. And you have translated that into being unique.
Yes.
And when I say unique, I actually mean Y-O-U-Nique.
Right.
Tell me about Younique and what that has looked like and what cosmetics have been for you.
Well, when I told you about my fiance dying all those years ago, everything we love to do, I love to do, we did together. Dancing, we would salsa dance, go all over in the middle of the summer down by the pier, barefoot salsa. It was the most sexy, amazing, passionate type of dance, kicking up the dirt in Manhattan. No matter where we were, there was a band. It was just beautiful. And I could not feel the same connection without thinking about him. Everything I go to the beach, I think about him. I go here. And not that I'm trying not to think about him, but I also want to have enjoyable experiences. And it was really hard. And I remember I was, sort of scrolling through Facebook, and I would see this girl come on. She was doing her makeup on a live video, and now everybody's doing it. But I remember finding this makeup that was natural, mineral-based makeup. It was just something at my age, too, that I always loved makeup. But I never found anything that felt like a foundation that didn't feel like it was clogging my pores or feeling really heavy on my face. I have to be able to breathe. And I felt like I couldn't breathe, all those kind of things. And so when I tried the makeup, I really loved it. And I was just planning on joining to get the discount for myself, because you don't have to put it out as a whole business. You can do what you want with it. And somebody said, why don't you go live and do your makeup? And I started to do live videos, and little by little, this company's so amazing with their skincare that I have never focused on my skin because I'm 62 years old. So nobody talked about it in your 20s. No one was taking collagen. No one was doing all these things. And now you got it so good out there. But it's never too late. And I felt so good about my skin. I felt good about, all of that. And I wanted to share it. And so that's what it came down to. So I started doing live videos. And I realized that my worlds were colliding because not only was I able to incorporate that, so before I went to Exponents to do my job as the Director of Health Services and provide wonderful, amazing, non-judgmental, true harm reduction services, I was able to be with another group of folks who needed this information and probably didn't necessarily see that they needed it. And some knew about HIV, some had friends who were HIV positive, but there's a whole group of folks who may not have thought about it. And they felt comfortable enough with me on our morning chat. I do wake up with Dana, so I get up extra early before work so I can take time and do my makeup after my shower. And we talk about all different things. And I find that HIV education is a lot of what we talk about because that has to do with my life. My addiction journey has to do with my life. And so many people have felt so much more comfortable asking me questions about HIV without feeling like they were going to look stupid if they didn't know. And they felt very comfortable, even messaging afterwards. I have a friend, I don't know what to do for them, whether it had to do with HIV or addiction. So in an effort to not do something that reminded me of him and to have something that was just mine, that was my journey with, makeup and skincare, and is my journey. And I do it as a side business. So I don't work in the community, and I make a nice salary, don't get me wrong. I'm not struggling, but it always helps working for a not-for-profit. It helps doing something on the side. But it really came from not so much that as much as just I found this to be a wonderful place that I can now educate others, and more so have them feel free to ask me questions about HIV, ask me a question about addiction, because I think there's still, as we know, it's hard to believe that in 2022, people don't know this, and they still don't have a lot of information and not a lot of correct information.
It's amazing. So long before the COVID pandemic, you were using electronic media, using live streaming to invite people to have these conversations. And you have, using yourself again as a tool for makeup, showing people of all ages how they can feel beautiful, look beautiful, feel their best, giving them like that agency to try things with their appearance, with their face, so that they can feel beautiful and confident. And that being a conduit for having these other conversations about health, about HIV, about addiction, about harm reduction, about living life in a meaningful way in your 50s and 60s. And you're so generous, I think, with your time that you do this for people. Was this ever hard for you to just be so open and honest?
I don't think so.
I'm the same way. I love putting it all out there, but I know it's like,
it's what I do. I don't know how to do anything else. Like, it's so much a part of who I am that I don't even think about it, because I know frequently someone has, or my supervisor sometimes says, I don't want you to always feel like you have to be that person. Other people can, I'm like, it's okay. I believe that's why I'm still here, and why, it's kind of been how I feel. Like, there were so many times in my life, and I look at how many people have died along the way, and how many times I should have died in all aspects of my life, in addiction, HIV, sex work, that I'm still here, and there's a purpose. I'm still here. That means I'm not done. And I believe part of this, the work I do at Exponents, the groundbreaking work, and how amazing, from the minute you step off that elevator on our floor, there's a feeling of, I'm in the right place. And that comes from being the culture and the foundation of exponents. And, you know, me doing this and breaking into the makeup and skincare world with this is along the lines of what I'm supposed to be doing. I guess more will be revealed in my life as I keep showing up.
It's amazing. You are amazing. I want to thank you so much for being you. And I absolutely love what you're saying about the purpose that you feel, that none of us can take for granted, you know, our lifetimes, and to use this gift of life to continue to share love and health with the community. And I just think that's beautiful and generous and very inspiring to me. And this is, you know, this is what I think this is about. This is what these Tough Talks are about. There's so much, if people turn on the news right now, there is so much death and trauma and scariness. And yet I feel like I'm surrounded by people like you who are superheroes. And I wanted to have this series so we could have an alternative to some of these scary things happening. Not that they're not happening, but at the same time, look at what Dana is doing every single day, showing up for your community as such an advocate of light and love and fun and play and resilience. And it's like, this is the new, like, this to me is what I think the news is really about. And the, you know, what you're doing is.
We can't forget that in the midst, and it doesn't mean that you're not feeling for folks who are suffering, and it doesn't mean that. But I don't believe that that's, I don't know how to say this, that that's all there is to life. And that in the midst of that, there are millions of people who are watching this and falling deeper into depression because that's all they see. And it's important to also balance out, because life is about balance. It does not mean that we're not helpful or supportive or feeling or empathetic to issues and problems that are going on in the world. But if we all felt every bit of it, we might as well just all perish right now. And so we're obviously not supposed to do that. So we're supposed to be here for each other. We're supposed to lift each other up. And we're supposed to just get, every day, just do the best we can do. And we can't do it alone. We need other people.
Yeah.
And so we should be there.
Beautiful. If people want to follow your journey, see some of your videos, follow your work, what is the best way for them to do that?
So a couple of things. Exponents.org is the organization I work for. Look us up because we're incredible. I might be a little biased, but it's okay because I truly believe in the mission. I'm also a spokesmodel with the HIV Stops With Me campaign, so go on hivstopswithme.org. Since I was so comfortable telling my story, it's a perfect chance to do it globally, and it is all social media based. And so follow hivtraining.org. And then for my makeup and skincare, like I don't have my my hands and feet in enough. It's Dana Diamond Stay Beautiful on Facebook. And if you reach me there, you can reach all the other, I can give you all the information for whatever else you want or need.
Great. And those links will be right, if you're watching this on YouTube, these links will be right below on there.
Cool.
Thank you again. Thank you for pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, showing up, getting in the tub. I know this isn't, people don't always realize it's not easy for guests to do this. And I really respect people so much and respect you so much for coming here.
Last night I told my daughters, you know, they're adults, but you know, I'm going to be in the tub doing an interview with someone. So you know, in case you see something, that they, thanks for the heads up. You know, she's like, in the tub? Or like virtually you're each in the tub? No, we're in the same tub. Okay?
In the tub. That's the Tub Talks. Yeah. So thank you so much for being in this world. Thank you so much for being in this tub. And we will just keep these conversations going.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for having me in the tub. It's so fantastic. I'm so honored. And I love and respect you and the work that you're doing every day.
I'm trying. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching Tough Talks.
Bye.
Bye.